So the reason why I think Rooney kind of strays away from traditional plot structure and creates this story told by flashbacks and timelines jumping around, I think the reason why she does this is to kind of reflect how trauma and emotion is felt in real life. Trauma and emotion is unpredictable. It can come out of nowhere. And a lot of the times it's not, or pretty much every time in the real world, it's not given to you exactly how it is, and the situation is not explained perfectly. And so there's always different opinions and recollections of events. So I think that's one of the reasons why Rooney sticks to this kind of weird plot structure. Another reason could be to make the reader work. What I mean by that is like with not when an author doesn't give the reader all the information straight up, the reader has to kind of skim through the text and think about what they're reading. And when you do this as a reader, you always tend to become more emotionally connected to the characters, and you just kind of feel more intimate with the story. And then a final reason why I think they might have included this is just because of the uniqueness factor of it. There aren't a lot of books like it, and so having this in your story could definitely make your book a big seller and more popular. To answer the second question that went along with the prompt, I do think this story definitely leaves room for an emotional trauma plot. And I pulled some evidence from the text to show that there is still trauma plot in this story, even though the plot structure is kind of weird. The first one being Connell's public display of affection. In the 3 months later chapter, July 2012, it says on page 118, when Connell is acting like a boyfriend in public, it says he put his arm around her waist in front of their other friends and kissed her on the temple. It was the first time he had done anything like that in public. And then obviously very shortly after that, it just kind of is abruptly stated that Connell's moving for the summer and that they're going to have to break up. And so the reader's kind of like, well, what happened in between this time frame? And then that's told with flashbacks, yada yada. And this is trauma plot. That is trauma, and that gives the reader a lot of emotion there. And then the second piece of evidence that I pulled was on page 85. This is when Marianne's kind of having a flashback to something mean that her brother said. He said, it says in the text, Alan had said something cruel to her, something about how no one would ever love her, and her mother had just stared at Marianne as if waiting to see how she would react. And the reason that the author uses this flashback is to kind of build and show why Marianne acts the way she acts in the present. And it answers a lot of questions, and it does create room for a trauma plot. And so the reader just kind of has to piece together these things to understand why they're happening. And I think it's a really cool and unique way of telling a story.